call came in at 2014 on a Tuesday afternoon, and I know the exact time because I'd just glanced at my phone to check if my husband had texted back about dinner. He hadn't. But someone else had called. Someone I wasn't expecting. The number showed up as Whitmore and Associates, and for a second I almost didn't answer. I was standing in the parking garage of the courthouse, car keys in hand, heels clicking on concrete, my mind still half wrapped around the deposition I'd just finished. Is this Carolyn? The woman's voice was professional, careful. Carolyn Aldridge? Speaking. This is Susan Hale, hiring partner at Whitmore. I'm calling because we received some unexpected communication regarding your candidacy for the senior litigation associate position. She paused. I wanted to reach out directly because, frankly, the situation is a little unusual. I stopped walking. Unusual how? We received an email 2 days ago from your address, your personal email, stating that you were withdrawing your application, that you'd discussed it with your husband and decided the demands of the role weren't compatible with your family's current priorities. The parking garage felt very still. Someone's car alarm went off 2 levels below me, a sharp mechanical shriek that echoed and faded. I didn't send that email, I said. She let the silence sit for exactly 1 second. That's why I'm calling. I don't remember the rest of the conversation very clearly. I remember thanking her. I remember saying I would follow up. I remember hanging up and standing next to my car for a long time without unlocking it, the keys pressing into my palm, the fluorescent lights of the garage humming above me. My husband's name was Connor Aldridge, financial analyst, endurance cyclist, the kind of man who remembers everyone's birthday and always brings the good wine to dinner parties. We'd been married for 2 years and 4 months. I'd spent about 22 of those months slowly becoming someone I didn't fully recognize. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing nobody tells you. It doesn't arrive like a storm you can see coming. It arrives like weather erosion, slow, patient, invisible, until suddenly you look up and the cliff edge is right there. When we met, I was 3 years into my litigation career, billing 600 hours a quarter, the kind of associate partners noticed. Connor had pursued me with what I'd mistaken for confidence. He'd researched my cases. He'd shown up at a bar association mixer I'd mentioned once in passing. He'd been charming in exactly the specific way that worked on me. Not flashy, not performative, thoughtful, attentive. Like he'd studied the blueprint. 14 months after we started dating, we got married at a vineyard in Sonoma. My mother cried. My best friend from law school, whom I'll call my closest friend rather than by name because she still hates public attention, gave a toast that made everyone laugh. Connor's speech was perfect. The subtle shifts started around month 4 of the marriage. First, it was the commute. My firm was downtown, 40 minutes each way on a good day. Connor suggested we look at places closer to his office in the financial district. It would simplify logistics, he said. We moved. My commute became 90 minutes round trip. His stayed at 15. Then it was the networking events. He started coming to firm functions, which I'd appreciated at first. But afterward, he always had quiet observations. That partner seemed to patronize you in front of the clients. Did you notice how your colleague interrupted you twice? Small doubts, planted gently, tended carefully. Then came the health concerns. I'd had 1 migraine, one after working back-to-back trials in October. Connor had been attentive, solicitous, wonderful. He'd brought me tea and turned off the lights and held my hand. He'd also begun mentioning it constantly afterward. You look tired. Are you getting those headaches again? I just worry the stress of your job isn't sustainable. Have you thought about whether you actually want to make partner or whether you just feel like you're supposed to want it? I hadn't thought about it, but after enough repetition, I started to. A year into our marriage, a senior associate position opened at Whitmore, one of the most respected litigation boutiques in the city. I'd have been a strong candidate. I mentioned it to Connor over dinner, and he'd listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions, and then gently suggested I think about whether the timing was right. We were still settling in. Partnership track was brutal. Maybe in a year or two, when things were more stable. I waited. 6 months later, I applied anyway. Secretly, using my sister's Wi-Fi and a personal laptop I kept at her apartment. I told myself it was just to see. Just to know if I still had it. The first round interview felt like coming up for air. Whitmore moved quickly. The offer was expected within days. I hadn't told Connor. I was still deciding how. He decided for me. I drove home from that parking garage on autopilot. Our apartment was a clean, curated space, white oak floors, matte black fixtures, art we'd chosen together that I now noticed mostly reflected his taste. Connor's car was in the garage. He was home early. He was in the kitchen when I walked in, standing at the island with his laptop open, wearing the gray fleece I'd given him for Christmas. He looked up and smiled and said, "Hey, you. How was the deposition?" I set my bag down. I got a call from Susan Hale at Whitmore today. Something moved across his face. Fast, controlled, gone. Oh? She said they received a withdrawal email from my account 2 days ago. I kept my voice even, saying I'd decided the role wasn't compatible with our family's priorities. He closed the laptop slowly. "Carolyn, I didn't write it. I watched him." "Did you?" He didn't answer immediately. He looked at me with that expression I'd spent 2 years interpreting as concern. I finally understood it was calculation. "You've been applying to jobs without telling me," he said. "Not a question." "You sent an email from my account without my knowledge," I said. "That's not the same thing. I was trying to protect you." His voice shifted into the register I knew, measured, patient, a little wounded. "You've been run down for months. The migraines, the late nights. Whitmore would have eaten you alive. You don't get to make that decision. We're married." He pushed off from the island. "We make decisions together. We didn't decide together. You decided alone and then forged my name on it." His expression shifted again, the patient husband routine dropping by a fraction. Forged is a strong word. It's the accurate word. He moved toward the living room, and I followed, and what came next was 40 minutes of the most honest conversation we'd ever had, which was devastating because most of it was him telling me things I didn't want to know. Her name was Trish. She was a junior analyst at his firm, 29 years old, and they'd been together since 4 months after our wedding. He'd met her at a company retreat in Scottsdale and apparently found her flexibility of ambition more aligned with his long-term goals, his actual words. She'd been quietly angling toward finance compliance, and the Whitmore position, which paid significantly more than her current role, had been something she'd discussed applying for herself. Connor had simply removed the obstacle. "You built an entire life with me as set dressing," I said, when he finally stopped talking. He had the grace to look briefly uncomfortable. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" He checked his watch. A gesture so mundane and so revealing that I almost laughed. "I think we both knew this wasn't working. I have paperwork." He walked to his briefcase on the side table, the same one I'd bought him for our first anniversary, and removed a manila folder. "My attorney drafted these. The terms are straightforward. There's a provision in our prenup about undisclosed financial activities, and your secret job search qualifies." I looked at the folder without touching it. "There's a settlement figure," he continued. $20,000. "Given the length of the marriage and the prenup terms, my attorney thinks it's generous." "Your attorney thinks it's generous," I repeated. "You can have your own counsel review it." He slid the folder toward me. "I'd like this handled quietly. Trish and I are moving to Denver next month. I've taken a position at a firm there. I prefer to be settled before any proceedings become public. Denver. Next month." I picked up the folder. I flipped to the signature page. His signature was already there, neat and confident in blue ink. "The offer is good through Friday," he said. I looked at him for a long time. The man I'd married, whom I had loved, who had somewhere along the way decided I was a resource to be managed, and then offloaded at the appropriate moment. I looked at his watch, his fleece, his careful face. "I'll need some time to review this," I said. "With my own attorney." A flash of impatience crossed his features. "I told you Friday is 3 days away." I picked up the folder and my bag. "I'll be in touch." I went upstairs. I heard him make a phone call. I sat on the edge of the guest bed. The room I'd converted into a home office, the one space that still felt like mine. And I allowed myself exactly 10 minutes to fall apart. I cried into a throw pillow I'd bought at a HomeGoods in the first month of our marriage, when I'd still been excited about decorating. Then I dried my face and opened my laptop. The email had come from my personal account. I knew my password. Connor had watched me log in hundreds of times. I logged in now and searched the sent folder. There it was. Sent at 11:47 a.m. on a Sunday, while I'd been at my sister's place helping her move furniture. Dear Ms. Hale, after careful consideration and discussion with my husband. 4 paragraphs. Professional tone. Plausible. I forwarded it to my own work account with a single line. Evidence, do not delete. Then I opened Connor's home laptop, which sat on the desk in our shared office. We'd both used it for household things. Streaming, bill pay, grocery lists. He'd never put a password on it because, as he once said with a small smile, we didn't have secrets. His email was open. What I found over the next 40 minutes didn't feel like discovery. It felt like reading the footnotes to a book I'd already lived. Everything that had confused me over 2 years, the timing, the small decisions, the convenient coincidences, resolved into clarity with each email I read. There were threads between Connor and Trish going back 18 months. A folder labeled Transition containing a draft budget for a Denver 2-bedroom. Correspondence with his attorney that predated our last anniversary by 6 weeks. Subject line Aldridge dissolution strategy, discussing the prenup clause and the best mechanism for triggering it. And one email from 3 months ago in which Connor wrote to Trish, "The Whitmore thing is actually ideal timing. Once that's off the table, her professional confidence takes another hit. She'll be too destabilized to contest anything cleanly." I read it twice. Then I screenshot it on my phone, along with 14 other emails, the budget document, and the attorney correspondence. I airdropped them all to myself and then to my sister, who I texted with a single message, "I need to stay with you tonight. I'll explain everything." Her response came in 30 seconds, doors unlocked. "I'll put the kettle on." I went downstairs and told Connor I needed space to think. He nodded, satisfied, the look of someone who believes he's already won. I drove to my sister's apartment with one bag and sat at her kitchen table until almost 2 in the morning, laying it all out while she listened without once telling me it would be okay. "What do you need?" she said when I'd finished. "Time," I said, "and to not let him know I have any of this." What followed was 6 weeks of the most deliberate work I've done in my professional life, and I have billed some genuinely brutal hours. I went back to the apartment the next morning and resumed my life as Connor understood it. I was quiet at breakfast. I said I was still processing. He was patient and slightly distant, the way someone is when they've already mentally moved on and are just waiting for the paperwork to clear. I called Susan Hale from my car on my lunch break, parked 2 blocks from the office. "The email didn't come from me," I told her. "I can provide technical documentation. I want to formally reopen my candidacy, and I need your confidence about that until I've addressed some personal legal matters." Susan was quiet for a moment. "Carolyn, the behavior you're describing is serious. I know, I have documentation. I'd like to show it to your managing partners and potentially to your firm's outside counsel because your hiring process was used as a mechanism in what I believe constitutes identity fraud." There was a longer pause. "Can you come in Thursday?" Thursday, I met with Susan and her managing partner, a methodical man named Robert who asked good questions and took careful notes. I brought a printed and digital copy of every email I'd collected, the forensic timeline my own tech-savvy paralegal friend had helped me put together showing the IP address of the sent withdrawal email, Connor's home laptop, logged at 11:47 a.m., and a 1-page memo I drafted summarizing the legal exposure Whitmore faced as an unwitting instrument in the scheme. By the end of the meeting, Robert leaned back and said, "We'd like to extend you a formal offer. And I'll be honest, given what you've brought us today, we're thinking about a role with broader scope than the one you originally applied for." I kept my face neutral. "What kind of scope?" "Senior associate with partnership track accelerated. We have a complex commercial litigation group that's been looking for the right person." I told them I needed a few days to consider. I didn't need a few days, but I needed Connor to believe nothing had changed for a little longer. The financial piece was methodical. I didn't touch the joint account. Any significant movement would alert him. Instead, I spent 4 weeks doing things that looked domestic and unremarkable. I sold several pieces of furniture I'd owned before the marriage to a consignment shop on the east side and received cash. I opened a checking account at a credit union 20 minutes away under my maiden name, using my sister's address. I gathered my documents: passport, bar license, law school diploma, the deed I'd never been added to despite contributing to the down payment, the tax returns that showed my pre-marriage income. I called my law school roommate, now a family law attorney in the city, and told her I needed counsel. She had the divorce papers reviewed within 48 hours. The prenup, she told me, had several provisions that were legally questionable given what I could demonstrate about the circumstances of my job loss. The forged email potentially constituted computer fraud under the CFAA. The financial accounts Connor had directed without my knowledge warranted a forensic accountant. He was counting on you signing quickly, she said. I know. He also has no idea what you have. I know that too. On the Thursday of week 6, Connor came home and mentioned he'd confirmed movers for the following Saturday. Denver was 6 days away. Trish was apparently already there, getting the apartment ready. Have you given any more thought to the paperwork? He asked over dinner. I'll have a response by Friday, I said. He nodded, satisfied. He poured himself another glass of wine. He talked about the Denver apartment, high ceilings, mountain views, a building with a climbing wall. He seemed genuinely happy in a way I realized I hadn't seen in a long time, and I understood it was because he was finally almost done with me. Friday morning, I called in a favor from a law school contact at the U.S. Attorney's office and sent him, unofficially, the documentation around the fraudulent email. He called me back in 2 hours. This is worth opening a file on. At 4 p.m., while Connor was at what he described as a farewell happy hour with his current firm, I had 2 of my sister's friends help me move my personal belongings out of the apartment. My law books, my files, my grandmother's jewelry, the desktop I'd had before the marriage, clothing, the throw pillow from the guest room. Everything fit into my sister's SUV and 1 U-Haul cargo van in under 3 hours. At 7 p.m., I sent Connor an email. Subject line: You underestimated what I'd do with the time. The email contained 4 attachments: the counter petition my attorney had filed that afternoon with the family court, a letter from my new attorney to his attorney, outlining the CFAA claim and requesting a litigation hold on all electronic devices, a letter from the Bar Association's Ethics Division acknowledging receipt of a formal complaint regarding the conduct of the attorney who had drafted the prenup under circumstances that may have involved undisclosed conflicts of interest, and a press release from Whitmore & Associates going out Monday morning, announcing my appointment as senior associate with an accelerated partnership track in their commercial litigation group. I was in my sister's guest room when the calls started. He called 6 times. I let each one go to voicemail and forwarded the recordings to my attorney. At the 7th call, I finally answered, not to speak, but to record. My attorney had advised me on the one-party consent laws in our state. You need to stop whatever you're doing, he said. His voice had lost its composure for the first time in 2 years. You don't understand what this looks like from the outside. I understand exactly what it looks like, I said. My attorney will be in touch on Monday. I hung up. The Denver move didn't happen. His firm there rescinded the offer once they received a courtesy call from the U.S. Attorney's office. Not a charge, just a contact, but enough. Trish disappeared from the picture within 2 weeks. I later heard she'd taken a position at a much smaller firm, far from anyone either of us knew. The divorce took 8 months. Connor settled rather than go to trial. My attorney had made it clear that trial would mean the CFAA documentation, the forensic financial analysis, and several of his firm colleagues being deposed about things they'd rather not discuss under oath. The settlement included my full share of the home equity, half of the investment accounts he'd opened without my knowledge, and a lump sum that was not $20,000. On the morning the final decree came through, I was sitting in my new office at Whitmore, 16th floor, view of the river. A desk that finally had my diplomas on the wall above it. Both of them. The undergraduate one and the law degree, which I'd kept rolled in a tube in my sister's closet for 2 years because Connor had said a home office should feel welcoming, not like a resume. My phone buzzed, my attorney's name on the screen. It's done. Congratulations. I set the phone down and looked out at the water for a while. A barge was moving slowly south, which seemed right somehow, unhurried, loaded, making progress at its own pace. Someone knocked on my door. My new paralegal, a sharp 26-year-old named, well, she goes by D, leaned in with a stack of briefs and the expression of someone who has questions but is being professional about it. The Morrison deposition materials are ready whenever you are. Give me 10 minutes, I said. She nodded and pulled the door closed behind her. I opened my laptop. I had a full calendar, 4 active cases, and a client call in the afternoon. I had a small apartment 2 miles from the office, a functioning bank account in my own name, and a commute that took 11 minutes door to door. I had, it turned out, everything I'd had before, and none of what I'd been talked out of wanting. The woman who'd stood in that parking garage 18 months ago, keys pressed into her palm, trying to make sense of a phone call that had just reordered her entire life. I think about her sometimes. How still she went. How long she stood there before she got in the car. She was smarter than he'd counted on. She just needed a minute to remember it. I've thought a lot about the version of me who stood in that parking garage. Keys in hand, fluorescent lights humming, car alarm echoing somewhere below. She didn't cry. She didn't call anyone. She just stood very still, the way you do when your body understands something before your mind catches up. What Connor didn't account for was that stillness. He'd spent 2 years mistaking my patience for passivity, my trust for naivety, my willingness to compromise for an absence of spine. He built a very detailed plan around a version of me that hadn't existed for a long time, if it ever had. That's the thing about people who manipulate quietly. They need you to stay confused. The whole architecture depends on you not quite seeing the full picture at any given moment. A comment here, a concern there, a small redirection that feels like love. By the time I understood what had happened to my career, my finances, my friendships, the erosion had been so gradual I'd almost accepted the new shoreline as normal. I didn't. And I think that matters more than any particular action I took afterward. Not the evidence I gathered, not the counterfiling, not the call to the U.S. Attorney's Office. All of that came later. What mattered first was a decision, made alone in a parking garage, to not accept the story someone else had written for me. There's something I want to say about intelligence, because I think we misunderstand it. We treat it like a fixed thing. You either have it or you don't, and it shows up in degrees and test scores. But what I learned from this is that real intelligence is also about knowing when you've been underestimating yourself. Connor had counted on me doubting my own instincts. He'd cultivated that doubt carefully, over months, the way you cultivate anything, consistently, patiently, without drawing attention to the work. The moment I stopped doubting and started documenting, the entire balance shifted. Integrity, too. I keep coming back to that word. Not as a virtue you perform, but as a structural thing. Connor had none, and it showed up eventually in every layer of what he'd built. The prenup drafted by a conflicted attorney, the email sent from my account without my knowledge, the Denver plan constructed on the assumption that I would be too destabilized to look clearly at anything. None of it held because none of it was sound. You cannot build something lasting on the foundation of another person's diminishment. It will find its cracks. And then there's the matter of persistence, the 6 weeks of showing up to that apartment, making breakfast, attending his work functions, smiling at colleagues who had no idea. I won't pretend that was easy. There were nights I wanted to just leave, to take what little I had and go and let him have the rest of it. But I'd already given up enough. I wasn't willing to give him the ending too. Carolyn walked out of that marriage with her career, her finances, her name, and her clarity intact. Not because things worked out perfectly. They didn't. Not at first. But because she refused to accept a settlement on someone else's terms, in someone else's timeline, for someone else's convenience. That's what I'd want anyone to take from this. The terms are negotiable. The timeline is yours. And the person who told you otherwise was counting on you not knowing that.